Welcome to King's Fine Woodworking. My name is James, and today I'd like to show you how I built this driveway gate. I'll be showing you everything except for the installation of the two posts on the outsides of the gate. Those were put in by the people who put in our driveway. They're 8x8 cedar posts. They're 10 feet tall, and they sank them 3 feet in the ground before pouring the concrete. The gate itself is just over 8 feet wide and just about 7 feet tall at the point of the peak in the middle. Some of the important requirements for this gate for me was that one that could swing either way, in or out, and that it just be hinged on one side. So I did have to have some pretty substantial hinges and some substantial framework as well. We're going to start with that. For the framework, I have all rough 2x8 cedar. Currently, cedar is really expensive. Fortunately for me, some of this I bought before the pandemic occurred when the price was reasonable, like the posts, because the posts were fairly expensive, and the framework as well. But the pickets, the 1x6s that go out in the front, I did buy those just recently in order to complete the project, and they were not cheap. So these pieces are for the two sides of the framework, and you see they come to a peak in the middle. That peak is what's going to establish the peak going up to the peak in the middle of the fence. And I've got that set at 15 degrees. And you see here I've marked a position down from the top where I am going to insert a cross rail. I'm going to have a half lap joint in order for maximum strength, and I'm laying it out as accurately as I can. And that's going to be so that I can fit in a cross rail that's going to go in between these two vertical components on the left and the right of the gate. And you can see that's the area of material that I'm going to have to remove for the half lap joint. I think a lot of gates probably wouldn't require a half lap joint. You can probably just screw or nail the cross rails onto the vertical components, and that would be strong enough. But with a gate that spans this much, and it being a pretty heavy gate, I really wanted to ensure that I was never going to get any sag in the future. And the advantage of a half lap joint where the rails are going to fit tightly into these vertical components means that it's not really going to be able to rack, which is going to prevent sagging in the future as well. Or it's at least going to help to some extent. Now I do happen to have a chop saw that has a stop on it, so I can cut down to a certain point and then just cut a bunch of small cuts. If you don't have a chop saw that does this, it's really no problem. You can just take a circular saw, set the depth of your blade down to the halfway point, and cut a bunch of slices out of the middle of it that way. It's pretty easy to do because then you just take a hammer, a mallet, whatever, and you knock those slices off and get them out of your way in order to make your half lap joint. Of course, the only way to do that is with one of these King's Fine Woodworking Thor's hammer mallets. I don't know that you could accomplish this with a regular hammer, but you could certainly give it a try. Once you've got most of those out of the way, you can just take a chisel and skim over the top and clean that up. They don't all break off perfectly flush, and it's really quick work with a chisel, and it doesn't have to be flawless. This isn't really fine woodworking. We just want to get that out of the way, and we'll check fit here. Looks like the fit is nice for our rail. The rail will have to be half lapped, and we'll do that in just a minute. But the first course of business is to take care of the half lap on the other end of this vertical component. So we use a sample board to mark where we're going to half lap in the bottom, and the procedure is really going to be the same. After we take our mark, we'll use our chop saw, or you'll use a circular saw, and make a bunch of cuts. We'll knock those out, and then we'll chisel them smooth. Then we'll have to make sure that we do this on the other rail. There's a completed, or the other vertical component. There's the left one. And once we've done that, and we've done the two ends on the rails themselves, we're ready to take it outside and do some assembly. And you can see how this is going to come together. I'm actually going to epoxy these together, so I do have some paper taped there on the ground because I don't want any epoxy to get onto my concrete. And we're just doing kind of a dry fit here to make sure that this works. You can see our dog Princess there. She's well, she was being a supervisor. Now she's just focused on that plant, I think. But anyway, there it is. That's what it looks like. And I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy. This is really good stuff. This is West Systems. You can buy that in a kit, a 32-ounce kit on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the description in case that's something that you might use. And you have to work quick. We have 2 people here, and then I'm going to help them as well. So we can do it quickly. It's important to apply adhesive to both sides. The epoxy probably isn't essential, but it's really going to help this gate last in the long term. I really don't ever want this to sag or come loose, and that's why we're applying this. We'll do it to both surfaces of all joints. And then as soon as that's done, we will reassemble it. We have pretty good fit on the half laps, which is nice. That'll also help lock it in place, give us kind of a nice mechanical lock. All right, and once that's done, then we're going to measure this piece from diagonal to diagonal. We want this to be square. I know that my vertical posts that are in the ground are perfectly plumb, straight up and down, and so it's important that the framework is also square, so it fits in between there, nice and square. So we'll take measurements on both sides from corner to corner. It doesn't matter if outside or inside corner, but whatever you do, you want to make a note and repeat that on the other side. Once it's square, then we'll put in some screws. These are some 1 5/8" screws, which are perfect for this 2x6 material, or 2x8 material, I'm sorry. And I'm actually going to put in 9, or my daughter Sai is going to put in 9. Put them in a grid pattern, and that will give us maximum strength. Once the square perimeter of the frame is done, we need to put in some diagonal bracing, and that's the strongest part of the whole gate. It's best to put the piece underneath it and trace it, and then cut it to fit the trace. And I'm just going to talk briefly about the bracing first. So I wanted to talk about bracing for gates real briefly. I noticed that several people on YouTube actually have fences out, and they have the brace the wrong way. So I drew a little mock-up here of the fence that we're building, and this would be the post, and this is the basic gate. You know, it's a rectangle, and then there's a brace that goes in the gate. So the question is, everybody asks, does the brace go this way, or does the brace go this way? Or does it matter at all? And it does matter. It actually matters a lot. So I drew this because I was going to try to explain exactly why it matters with this, but I realized this two-dimensional form makes it more difficult. So instead, I built a mock-up, a 3D mock-up of the whole thing. And that looks like this. Let me get this out of the way here. Okay, so here's the 3D mock-up that I made. It's just exactly like a gate. We've got a gate here, we've got hinges there, we've got our post. So it's just like that. And so let's put this thing together here. And here's our brace. Get our brace to fit. So I made some half-lap joints, but I made the half-lap joints a little bit big so that our gate can move up and down and we can talk about sag. All right, so this is the way they need to go. And I'll explain why. This is, if the hinges are on this side, we need to run a brace in a diagonal position, and we want the high part of the brace to be opposite of the hinges. This is because when gravity is acting on the gate, gravity is pulling with a downward force, and the downward force over here isn't really a problem because there's hinges. But the problem is to have the downward force over here, that over time it's going to make the gate want to sag. So regardless of how the brace goes in, it's going to be assisted mechanically because we're going to have pickets that come in here, and these individual pickets that come in here, it's going to have nails down here, it's going to have nails here, and it's going to have nails here. So that is going to help hold it in place, but so it gives us some mechanical advantage, but with this brace we can actually gain some structural advantage. And so I'll show you this way. Let's take a look at this way real quick here. Oops. This is the way I see a lot of people putting them in. And you can see if the brace goes opposite of the way I just said to put it, that the brace mechanically can't even hold up the gate under its own weight. The gate's going to sag. That's because, assuming we had this fastened in tight, when pressure comes here from gravity, that puts this under tension. So this needs to be longer. So it pulls, there's a tension on it, a pulling force on it. And that would be assisted when the pickets are in, that would help it out. But we're not gaining any structural advantage by putting the rail or the brace this way. So let's take a look at this way. If we put the brace this way, so right away it will support itself. Because when the weight comes here, then that transfers the load down this way, and we have this board under compression. In fact, it's so strong this way that this little gate made of 1x2s and really small hinges can support a considerable amount of weight. This is a 10-pound weight, and you can see it's carrying this weight no problem. In fact, I could put more weight. This gate will never sag. It may rip out the hinges, but if you put the brace this way, the gate simply can't sag. And that's how you get structural advantage. Just remember that. Okay, with that sorted, we're going to go back to our brace in real life here, and we're going to trace it out. This is just more accurate than measuring it. I like to, whenever I can, I like to put the piece actually in place, trace it, and then cut it. That way we know we have an exact fit. I might take a moment to say, if you enjoy our videos, we would appreciate it if you'd click that subscribe button, and you can even click that notification bell down below. That really helps us out. Alright, so after the cut, we're going to come over here and do a test fit and see how well that fits. We can tap it in place, or if it's too tight, might have to stomp on it. If it's still too tight, we can always trim a little bit off, but it looks like that's a perfect fit. So we're going to do a few more things to really help out the longevity of this gate. We're going to put some pocket screws in, which is going to hold it nice and secure until the epoxy dries. I think it's critical to do whatever we can to make sure this is strong, because I would like for this gate to last forever. I may be in this home the rest of my life, and that's really important. So we want to do, once again, put epoxy on both sides of all of the joints. And we have to work quick. It's 5-minute epoxy and get a good thorough coat. And that plus the pocket screws is going to ensure that this diagonal brace can never come out. And it's going to add a lot of structural rigidity to the gate. So my wife Rupa is going to stand on the outside part of the framework and make sure that it stays nice and flush with the diagonal brace, and Sai is going to drive in the pocket screws. And the pocket screws will add long-term strength, but they'll also hold it still and not moving while the epoxy cures. Once that's done, we can lift it up and check it out. If you got a lot of epoxy overspill, then you might take a little bit of time to peel off some of that paper, but that's not really a big deal.
All right, lower it down.
But what they're doing now is they're flipping it over, because I did put pocket screws on both sides and just a couple on the back side, but it's just one more thing to kind of beef up the integrity of the gate. Once that gets done, they are going to insert a horizontal rail, something that kind of goes right down the middle of the whole gate. And we'll do the same thing here. We're going to get it measured so that it's positioned right in the center, the way we want it. And then we'll use a pencil and we'll mark the location. You see how we have pencil marked location on the vertical components as to where this rail needs to cross. On both sides we have that. And now we'll trace these pieces and we'll cut them out in order to put these in. This is going to beef up the main diagonal cross brace. It's going to prevent it from bowing or flexing. I don't think that a 2x8 would do that anyhow, but it's also going to allow us to get one more row of diagonal braces in beneath that, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a moment. Same thing here. We've got pocket screws and epoxy holding this in place, and we're just making sure we're keeping it in a nice straight line. That's why I don't know if you can see the blue chalk line snapped on that diagonal rail. It just ensures that the whole thing is straight and looks good at the end. You can see it there. If this is something you think you might be interested in, maybe putting in an 8-foot gate in the future, I'm just going to give away a free set of the plan that I put together for the building of this. It shows all the angles and dimensions and measurements and stuff like that. And if you do a gate that's this wide, you can use it exactly, or you could modify it, shrink it a little bit if necessary. Okay, and here we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to add one more diagonal brace. We're keeping it a specific distance down from the middle brace so that the distance between that and the corners are kind of balanced out. Gives us a good look, but this diagonal brace also is really, it's in the right orientation, so it's really going to beef up the structural integrity of the gate. The main one would probably have been enough, but the gate does weigh about 200 pounds, 250 pounds, so anything we can do to make it strong is probably a good idea. Okay, so now I'm finally getting to the top part of the gate. It comes to a peak in the top middle portion, and I'm cutting those angles. And it's not just a straight peak with straight edges. It's got a little curve to it, and I'll show you that. And here I'm putting in some dominoes. You could put dowels here, or you could even pocket screw this together. But the dominoes are going to hold the peak together. And you'll see what that looks like in just a second. There's a left side of the peak and a right side of the peak, and we're going to do the same thing here with epoxy. Make sure we get the domino fully coated, the holes fully coated, and then both sides of each joint coated. Whenever you put glue, it's best to not leave anything uncoated. And you do have to work quickly, and you certainly don't want to get epoxy on your hands. That'll make you start to become sensitized to it. So wear gloves whenever you use epoxy, and make sure you use it in a ventilated area. Okay, so the peak is coming together. The dominoes are giving us some nice alignment and a little bit of pull-apart strength as well. And then the pocket screws are going to help hold that securely, both in the long term, and they're going to hold it while the epoxy dries. And we do have pocket screws on both sides of that joint as well. So this is the top peak, and the point is facing towards me, but I don't want the edges straight. I want the edges a little bit curved because I want something decorative. So I've just got a long, thin board that we're going to warp into a bit of a curved shape, and I think it's going to add a nice design or element or feature, some architectural detail to the gate itself, and it doesn't require much effort. So I've got some 2x8, and then I'm cutting a portion of it away, but cutting away in a nice arch, and I think that really makes it look nice. Once it's marked out on both sides and it's symmetrical, we'll just get a jigsaw and cut this out. So I do have a Festool jigsaw. I'm not a big fan of their jigsaw. I actually like my DeWalt jigsaw better, but that's out on loan. I bought this because I love the Festool sanders so much, and I was a little bit disappointed in their jigsaw. At any rate, there is the arch. So I do have some sanding. I'll hit that with a belt sander to smooth it up, but I think that arch just looks better than having straight edges, and you'll get a better view of that when it's all put together as well. And so there we go, it fits the ends there. And here we're going to put some dominoes also to hold this together. So these dominoes are going into the side vertical stiles, and they're going to go into the bottom of that very top cross piece. And we're still going to do pocket screws also. And then, of course, epoxy. And we're not really relying on the dominoes and the epoxy and stuff to hold this together, because remember, the pickets themselves are going all across the entire gate. So pickets are nailing into the top, into the vertical rails, and into the cross rails. All right, so the very first cross piece we just measured to put that in. And now we're going to put a couple of braces here. These are just more for detail and to beef up the structure in general. So once those are in, that was it. Now here's our posts. And we have to drill holes all the way through the post, so sometimes it's a good idea to have a speed square and just kind of keep an eye on that speed square as we're putting this in, because I do have to drill all the way through this 8-inch post. And this is the great big beefy part of the hinge that gets permanently bolted to the post. So that'll go all the way through the post, and then it'll get a washer and a nut on the backside, and we'll bolt that tight. I did have to measure to make sure I got these down the center of the post. It's important that they're all three in one line. We have one low, middle, and high. And they're securely bolted down at the backside. Got to bolt them in tight so they sink into the wood a bit. They're carrying quite a bit of weight. Now I've got some spacer blocks on the ground. We'll set this gate up on the spacer blocks to get a good altitude off of the ground for the gate itself. And before we can put in the hinges, the strap hinges that go on the gate, I actually need the pickets on the front first, because the hinges are 2 inches wide, so they're going to have to reach around the pickets in the front. So we got to put on about the first 4 or 5 pickets and we're letting them run wild up at the top, and we'll trim those down later. So we've got to put in the first 4 or 5 pickets to get them past the point where the strap hinges go, and then we can hinge it, and then we can put in the remainder of the pickets after that. So Sai's installing the pickets for us. The first one we're just lining up flush with the edge of the fence itself, or the gate itself. And you do want to get nails in every cross piece. So whether it be a brace, a vertical component, or a horizontal rail, you want to get nails in everything. That's going to add to the strength. The more nailing that we can do, the better. And actually, I wasn't going to video this originally, but we had a member of our Facebook group ask about it, and we were putting the gate in, so we decided to film it and show people since they asked about it. And if you're not a member of our Facebook community, you might consider joining. I'll put a link in the description down below. It's a private community for woodworkers by woodworkers, and lots of cool stuff in there going on, a lot of comments, and you can show your work, and you can help others, and others can help you. Lastly, I did have to put a little bit of a picket on the backside here to build out the thickness of the gate, because it had to be, actually it had to be 3 inches wide in order to hold the straps. So when you order straps, they'll tell you what kind of thickness has to be. And now that those are there and the pickets are there, we're starting to install the straps. These are the straps. And so we'll just slide these down in place here. And they will go over the post that comes out of the rail there. And then we need to pre-drill these, or drill them all the way through actually. So I'll drill most of the way through on one side, and we can come from the other side and finish that hole off. And then it comes with carriage bolts. These do. I'll put links to all these components in the description in case this is a gate that any of you out there think you might want to build. And of course, down in the description is where I will put the link to the plans. Plans are free for anybody who wants them. And that carriage bolt's got to be oriented just right, because the square on the carriage bolt locks into the square on that strap hinge. And on the back side we will put a washer and a nut. And there's 3 of these bolts. I think they're 3/8 size bolts that hold this thing on. So the whole thing is pretty heavy duty. I think they rated one of these strap hinges at like 1,000 or 2,000 pounds. I can't recall, but it was an enormous amount of weight. So it's far more than what's necessary for a 250-pound gate. I just crank it down about as tight as I can. And once we get one in and crank down tight, I will put in the holes for the other 2. Alright, so after those are done and the gate's hanging, we can go ahead and insert the rest of the pickets. And I'm helping Sai out here, and you see I've got a little gap there on the bottom where I want the pickets to come down to. I don't want the gate to drag the ground anywhere. And like I said, we do need to get nails in every part of the structure of the gate. That's actually going to help hold the structure together as well. Not as good, of course, as the bracing, but it will still be a significant help. And we're using ring-shanked galvanized nails. Galvanized so they don't rust and they don't bleed out onto the wood when they rust. And ring-shanked because they have a lot of grip or holding power. So once they're all in, I'm actually using a flush trim bit on the router. This is a pretty big, aggressive bit. It's a 3/4 inch diameter bit. It's made by Whiteside. It's got a bearing on the top, on the bottom part of the bit that I'm riding on the rail back there, that arched rail. And then we're just cutting right through these pickets. These pickets are probably not quite 3/4 of an inch thick, and they're cedar and they're very soft. So I don't really have to do it in multiple passes. That'd be very awkward or very difficult to do if I couldn't do it like this. So this is really kind of a pretty easy method to get it cut to the contour that I'm looking for. Next, Sai has climbed up to the top of the fence to put a nice big bevel on the tops of those 8x8 posts and kind of give it a neat look. I wanted the posts to hang up above the top, and I wanted a little bit of a bevel up there to kind of give some detail to it. And this next part is something that was required for us because we have a really small dog, and the nature of a gate that opens both ways is that there's a big gap at the back. So I've got some vertical 2x4s here. We put some pocket screws in, and Saya's putting those in place to minimize, or to eliminate really, those gaps so our little dog can't get out. She's a little Morky, and she just probably would walk right through that gap otherwise. So that's why these are here. They're certainly not necessary. They don't do anything other than keep that little puppy inside the gate. Once again, it would be awesome if any of you guys watching who are not subscribed to our channel, if you could take the time and just hit that subscribe button. We'd really appreciate that. That's kind of how our channel grows. A lot of times I forget to ask that, and I notice when we look at our analytics that 85% of the people who watch our videos aren't subscribed. So if you're one of those, we'd appreciate it if you took the time to subscribe. Thank you. So with this very last piece at the bottom, I don't think she can get out now. That would be nice. And I think we're going to go ahead and just put one at the top just for continuity. It follows the kind of the contour of the top of the gate going over there. It's not really necessary, but when the gate's closed, it does have a little bit of a neater look to it in general. And size clearly way too short to put this in, so that's why I have to help her out. And once she hears me say that, I'll probably be in trouble. And so we'll just test it. Here's the close, and now that it closes, you can see that there really is no gap there anymore. So little puppy can't get out. And she can't get out the bottom. We did measure that part too. Okay, so next I want to put in a lock. We want to put in a door lock so that it takes a key. This is like a big deadbolt. It's an outdoor deadbolt made of stainless steel and brass. But that way we can put in a key, and no one can get in our gate, or out of the gate either, I suppose, without that key. This is a pretty cool thing. I never knew such a thing existed until I went looking for some sort of a latch, and I happened upon this, and I love it. We've actually been using the gate now already for probably 3 or 4 weeks, and I think this thing is fantastic. This thing is super easy to install. You could probably put it on any gate, and it's just really nice to have. If you have a locking gate, something you need to lock, you know, we just like to keep the back area secure. We've got our workshop back there, and I think this gives one more little measure of security. So just put some deck screws in. That's about it for that part. And we'll do a little quick test with a key, and you see it's a long throw deadbolt. So that's going to penetrate over 1 inch into the post. And so where I need to see where it comes to the post, we'll make a couple of pencil marks, and then we're going to drill that hole out in the post. I'll make the hole a little bit taller top to bottom in the unlikely event that our gate sags a tiny bit. That way the deadbolt will still work. And we'll take the time to chisel it square, give it a little bit of a neater look, and make sure that the deadbolt can go in there nicely. And that looks like that will work. And one final test, and there it is. That's the deadbolt. It's all locked, so now the gate's nice and secure. And on the other side, it comes with a handle. And this is what we can use to pull the gate open with from this side. And that's really it. So that is the gate in its entirety. We will probably take the time to finish the gate, put some Pinafin or some sort of other outdoor finish on it. Well, I'll be using Pinafin, I suppose. We'll do one final check. Or Rupa will, my wife there. And it looks good. So that's it. That's the gate in its entirety, all complete. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. We'll kind of give you a couple of shots of it opening and closing. And that's it. Thanks for watching.